The stars stretched wide across the dark sky as Mark's small ship moved closer to the world of the Zalari. He had traveled far from Earth, guided only by messages that promised peace and knowledge. The planet looked like a jewel from space, glowing with rivers of light and oceans that shimmered like glass. Mark felt a mix of excitement and unease as his ship entered the landing bay prepared for him. This was no ordinary visit. He had been invited by the Queen herself. The Zalari people were tall, graceful, and powerful. Their city rose high with towers that glowed softly, not built from stone or metal but from crystal that seemed alive. The air inside the city was warm and filled with a soft hum, like music without instruments. As Mark stepped down from his ship, he was greeted by guards wearing armor that looked like silver water. Their eyes were watchful, but their movements showed respect. Mark had studied many alien cultures, but he had never met a queen of another world. His heart raced as he was guided through wide halls of crystal, each wall shining with faint lights that shifted like the colors of dawn. The guards walked with him in silence until they reached a great chamber. The doors opened slowly, and the hall inside made him pause. It was vast, with pillars taller than any building he had seen on Earth. The ceiling sparkled like the night sky, filled with moving stars that seemed alive. At the center of the hall sat the Queen. She was taller than any human, her form strong yet elegant, her crown made not of metal but of glowing vines that curled gently around her head. Her eyes were deep and sharp, yet there was calm in them. She did not rise, but her presence alone filled the chamber with authority. Mark bowed slightly, unsure of the proper way to greet her. "Welcome, human traveler," the Queen said in a voice that carried like a song. "You are far from your home. We honor your courage to cross the stars and come here alone." Mark nodded, trying to keep his voice steady. "It is an honor to stand before you, my Queen." The Queen studied him for a moment, then motioned with her hand. From the side of the chamber stepped another figure. It was her daughter, Princess Rena. She was unlike anything Mark had expected. Her form carried the grace of her people, but there was something softer in her presence. Her eyes held curiosity, and her movements were gentle, almost shy. "Human," the Queen continued, "my daughter has heard much about your kind. She admires your people and your courage. She has asked that you remain among us to learn, to share, and to know our ways." Mark felt the weight of the Queen's words. This was no small request. To stay meant to leave behind everything familiar, to live under the watch of a new people whose ways he barely understood. Still, he could see that this was not only a request but also a test. He knew the Queen's eyes were on him, searching for his answer, measuring his spirit. The chamber fell quiet, the courtiers watching carefully. Mark's mind raced. He had faced many challenges before, but nothing like this. He had to be careful, yet he could not show fear. He looked at Princess Rena again. She met his eyes for a moment, and in that glance he saw kindness and hope. Mark spoke with respect. "Your Majesty, I came here to learn and to understand. If it is your wish, I will stay. I will share what I know and listen to what you teach." A faint smile touched the Queen's lips, though her gaze remained strong. She leaned forward slightly. "Then it begins. You will remain here as our guest. You will see our world as few outsiders ever have. But remember, human, you are here because my daughter asked it. Honor her trust." Mark bowed again, this time with deeper respect. The Queen's words carried more than welcome. They carried challenge, perhaps even warning. Yet within that challenge, Mark felt the beginning of something greater than he had imagined. As the Queen dismissed the court, the princess lingered for a moment longer. She did not speak, but her eyes rested on Mark before she turned and followed her mother. Mark stood alone in the vast hall, his thoughts heavy with questions. He had crossed the stars for knowledge, but now it seemed he had stepped into a story far greater than himself. Outside the chamber, the guards guided him to the guest quarters prepared for him. The rooms were bright with crystal light, filled with strange yet beautiful objects that glowed with quiet energy. Mark sat on a low seat and let out a long breath. He could still hear the Queen's voice in his mind, strong and certain. He did not know what trials awaited him, but one thing was clear. His life had just changed. The Queen had spoken, the princess had watched, and the fate of his stay among the Zalari would test more than just his courage. It would test his heart, his honesty, and the very spirit of humanity. The great hall of shining crystals glowed softly as Mark stood before the Queen. Her throne rose high above the floor, carved from living crystal that pulsed with light. Around them, Nobles of the Zalari court whispered in hushed tones, their tall forms shifting with curiosity. The queen's eyes fixed sharply on Mark, and her voice carried across the chamber with authority. "Why don't you love my daughter, human?" she asked. The words echoed through the walls, filling the vast chamber. It was not just a question. It was a challenge. Mark's breath caught in his chest. He had prepared for many things on this journey, but not this. His heart raced as he looked toward Princess Rena. She stood near her mother, tall and graceful, her skin glowing faintly with the light of the crystals. Her beauty was beyond anything he had seen before, and yet it was not only beauty that struck him. There was something deeper, a presence that carried both strength and innocence. Every noble in the hall turned their gaze on him. Mark felt the weight of 1,000 eyes pressing down. He could hear the faint hum of the living walls like music waiting for his reply. Silence stretched longer with every passing moment. If he spoke wrongly, he might insult the queen, and no human had ever survived offending the Zalari throne. He drew in a slow breath and let his eyes rest on Rena once more. She met his gaze without fear, her expression curious rather than angry. Mark saw that she was waiting not for flattery but for truth. "My queen," Mark said at last, his voice steady though his chest burned with nerves. "Your daughter is too beautiful. Her presence is overwhelming. I fear I am not worthy of her." The words left his mouth and the hall fell silent. Nobles shifted in surprise. Some tilted their heads, unsure if they had understood him. Others covered their mouths in shock. The idea that a human would refuse such beauty was something few of them could grasp. The queen leaned forward, her crown of glowing vines swaying slightly as her sharp eyes studied him. The court waited for her reaction. For a long moment she said nothing. The silence grew heavy, almost crushing. At last she spoke. "Too beautiful?" Her tone was calm but edged with curiosity. "You fear her beauty?" Mark bowed his head respectfully. "Yes, my queen. I come from a world where we see beauty, but it is not beauty alone that makes love. Beauty can blind the heart if it stands alone. I would rather know her mind, her spirit, and her truth before I could claim to love her. To love only her beauty would be to dishonor her." The nobles gasped. A few whispered among themselves. To them such words were strange. To them beauty was power and power was love. Yet this human spoke of something else. Rena's eyes widened. She had heard many suitors from across the stars speak in her presence. They praised her face, her form, her grace. None had spoken of her heart. None had ever questioned her beauty. The human's words stirred something inside her, something she could not name. The queen did not speak right away. Instead, she leaned back in her throne, her expression unreadable. Her advisors whispered at her side, urging her to take offense, but she silenced them with a wave of her hand. Her gaze never left Mark. "You are bold, human," she said slowly. "Others would have begged for her hand. Others would have drowned me with songs of praise. Yet you speak of fear, of unworthiness. Is this weakness or is it strength?" Mark stood tall. "It is honesty, my queen. I cannot give you false words. If I am to remain here, if I am to serve your trust, then I must speak truth." A murmur swept through the hall. Some nobles laughed softly, others frowned. But in the queen's eyes there was a spark of interest. She was not insulted. She was intrigued. Princess Rena stepped forward, her voice gentle yet clear. "Human, you say you fear my beauty. Tell me then, what do you see when you look at me?" Mark turned his gaze to her again. His heart pounded, but he did not falter. "I see more than beauty," he said. "I see someone who watches carefully, someone who listens. I see kindness in your eyes, though it is hidden behind duty. I see someone who wants to be known for more than appearance." "That is what I see, princess." The hall grew silent once more. Rena's lips parted slightly, her eyes shining with surprise. She had never been spoken to in such a way. The queen, watching both her daughter and the human, rested her chin on her hand in thought. Finally she spoke. "Your words are strange to us, human, but they are not without weight. Perhaps you are not as unworthy as you fear. Perhaps you carry something rare." The queen's voice rang through the hall and the courtiers bowed their heads. The moment had passed, yet its mark remained. Mark had spoken from his heart, and in doing so he had changed the air of the chamber. The queen no longer looked at him as just a guest. She looked at him as a puzzle, a test, and perhaps something more. As the court session ended, Mark was led from the hall by the guards. His steps were steady, but his mind raced with thoughts. He had spoken the truth, but he did not yet know if that truth would save him or doom him. Still, one thing was clear. The eyes of the queen and her daughter were upon him, and his every word from this day forward would carry great weight. The silence of the queen's hall still lingered in Mark's mind as he walked back to the quarters given to him. He had spoken honestly, but honesty in a foreign court could be as dangerous as any weapon. He knew every word he said would echo through the corridors of power for days to come. Still, he could not lie. It was not in his heart to offer empty praise even if the queen demanded it. That night the guest quarters were quiet. The glowing crystals in the walls dimmed as though they followed the rhythm of the day. Mark sat by a wide window that opened to the alien city. The towers of the Zalari rose like shining spears, each pulsing with gentle light. Flying crafts moved silently between them, glowing like fireflies in the night. It was beautiful. Yet Mark could not shake the weight of what had happened. He had told the queen her daughter was too beautiful, and instead of punishment, he had been left with mystery. The next morning, guards came to escort him back to the royal gardens. The path wound through tall crystal trees whose leaves shimmered like glass. The air was warm and filled with soft scents of alien flowers. At the center of the garden stood Princess Rena, waiting. She wore a robe of pale silver that moved like water when she turned. "Human," she said, her voice calm but filled with curiosity. "You spoke boldly before my mother. You said I am too beautiful for you to love. Do you truly mean those words, or did you speak them only to win her respect?" Mark looked at her, and for the first time he saw not only a princess but also a person burdened by expectation. He walked closer, careful with his words. "I meant them, princess. Your beauty is not something I can deny, but beauty alone cannot be the reason for love. To say I love you for beauty would be to see only the surface, and I think you deserve more than that." Rena studied him with wide eyes. She had heard endless flattery in her life, had listened to countless suitors who saw only her face and form. None had ever said what Mark said now. She folded her hands and spoke softly. "You are different, human. Most who come before me wish only to gain favor through praise. You refuse it. Why?" Mark smiled faintly. "Because my people believe love is built on knowing someone's heart. We admire beauty, but beauty fades. What lasts is trust, kindness, and courage. If I say I love you now, it would be false. I do not yet know your heart." For a moment, silence hung between them. Then, to Mark's surprise, Rena smiled. It was not the regal smile of a princess, but a warm, almost shy smile of someone who had been seen for the first time. "You speak of things no one here has spoken to me," she said. "Perhaps you are right. Perhaps beauty is not enough. But tell me, human, what do you fear about my beauty?" Mark took a deep breath. He looked at her with honesty. "I fear it blinds me. I fear I would stop listening, stop seeing the truth of who you are because your beauty demands all my attention. I fear it would make me weak, and weakness is dangerous in a place like this." Her smile faded slightly, replaced by thought. She looked down at the crystal flowers at her feet, then back at him. "You are not weak, human. You have more courage than you think. To stand before my mother and speak such words was not the act of weakness, but of strength." Mark bowed his head slightly. "Strength without truth is nothing. That is what I believe." They walked slowly through the garden together, their voices softer now. Rena asked questions about Earth, about human life, about the way humans built families and shared love. Mark answered with patience, telling her of small things like the changing seasons, the warmth of sunlight, the laughter of children. She listened with deep interest, as though each word opened a door to a world she had never known. By the time the sun of Zalari dipped low, painting the towers in golden light, Rena stopped and looked at him once more. "You may not love me yet, human," she said, "but I think you see me more clearly than anyone ever has. For that I am grateful." Mark bowed with respect. "Thank you, princess. That means more to me than you know." Unseen by them, high above in a balcony of crystal, the queen watched. She had listened to every word, her sharp eyes studying the human carefully. She saw not only his honesty, but also the way her daughter looked at him now. There was no anger in her heart, only curiosity and perhaps the beginning of respect. When Mark returned to his quarters that evening, he felt lighter. He had spoken his truth and had been heard. For the first time since arriving on the planet, he felt that perhaps he could belong. But he also knew the queen was far from finished testing him. The question was not only about her daughter's beauty, it was about the spirit of humanity itself, and Mark would have to prove it with every step he took. The next day, the grand court of the Zalari was alive with whispers. The human's strange words had spread like fire through the palace. Many nobles could not understand why Mark had refused to declare love for the princess. Some laughed and said humans were foolish creatures. Others, however, admired his courage, for it was rare to stand before the queen and speak without fear. Mark entered the great hall again, escorted by 2 guards. The vast chamber glowed with crystal light, and the nobles lined the sides, their eyes fixed on him with open curiosity. As he walked, he could feel their stares, sharp as blades, testing his resolve. At the far end, the queen sat on her throne, tall and majestic. Her crown shimmered with living vines of light, and her eyes were sharp as stars. By her side stood Princess Rena, her posture graceful but her expression calm, almost unreadable. The queen raised her hand, and silence fell over the court. "You all heard the words of this human," she said, her voice carrying across the chamber like a song. "He told me he does not love my daughter because her beauty is too great. He claimed love must be more than appearance. What do you make of such words?" The nobles stirred, murmuring their thoughts. Some scoffed, saying beauty was power and power was enough. Others whispered that perhaps the human's words carried wisdom. Soon the voices grew louder until the queen's gaze silenced them once more. She turned her eyes to Mark. "Human, speak again before my court. Tell us why beauty is not enough for love." Mark bowed his head with respect, then lifted his voice clearly. "Your Majesty, nobles of Zilari, beauty is a gift, but it fades with time. What lasts is kindness, trust, and courage. If love rests only on beauty, it is weak. True love must rest on the heart. On earth, we believe love is tested not in calm but in storms. When hardship comes, beauty cannot hold 2 souls together, but trust can." The hall grew silent. His words seemed strange to many, yet they carried weight. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then a noble stepped forward, tall and clad in silver robes. "Human, you insult our ways. Among the Zilari, beauty is honor, and to praise it is the highest form of love. To deny this is to deny our truth." Mark looked at him calmly. "I do not deny your truth. I only speak mine. To praise beauty without knowing the heart is to love a mask, not the person behind it." Gasps echoed through the hall. Some nobles frowned, others raised their brows in thought. The queen leaned back in her throne, her lips curved in a faint, unreadable smile. Rena stepped forward then, her voice soft, yet clear. "I wish to hear more. Human, if love is not built on beauty, what else must it hold?" Mark turned to her. His voice was steady but gentle. "It must hold respect, princess. It must hold the courage to stand together in hardship, the patience to listen, and the loyalty to remain when others would turn away. Love is not easy, but it is strong when it is real." The court grew restless. Some nobles argued in whispers, others looked at Rena with curiosity. Never before had the princess asked such questions in open court. Never before had anyone spoken to her as this human did. The queen lifted her hand once more. Silence returned, her gaze fixed on Mark, sharp and searching. "You speak boldly, human, but words alone are not enough. My people live by proof, not only by speech. If your spirit is true, then it must be tested." Mark bowed slightly. "I am ready, my queen." Her eyes gleamed with interest. "In time, I will set trials for you. If you pass, perhaps your words will hold weight among us. If you fail, your truth will be as dust in the wind." The court buzzed with energy at her words. A trial was rare, and to place it upon a guest was even rarer. Many nobles looked eager to see the human fail. Others seemed curious, wondering if he could truly endure the tests of the Zilari. As the session ended, Rena glanced once at Mark. Her eyes were filled not with judgment but with thought, as if she too wondered what he might prove. Then she turned and followed her mother out of the hall. When Mark was led back to his chambers, his mind was heavy but his spirit steady. He had spoken the truth again, and now it had placed him on a dangerous path. Yet he did not regret it. To lie would have been easy, but it would have meant losing himself. Better to face the queen's trials with honesty than to live as a shadow of his own heart. That night, as the city glowed beneath the alien stars, Mark stood by the window of his quarters. He could see the great towers shining in the distance and hear the faint hum of the living crystals. Somewhere within the palace, the queen was planning his tests, and the princess was thinking of his words. He did not know what awaited him, but he knew one thing with certainty. The path before him would not only test his courage, but also show the true strength of the human spirit. The morning came with soft golden light filtering through the crystal walls of Mark's quarters. The hum of the city was gentle but constant, as though the very ground carried music. Mark rose from his seat and tried to steady his thoughts. The Queen had spoken clearly. Words were not enough. His truth would have to be proven. When the guards arrived, they did not speak much. They only gestured for him to follow. Their tall forms and flowing silver armor gave them an unshakable air, and though they showed no open hostility, Mark could sense that many of them hoped he would fail. As they walked through long corridors of glowing walls, he could see nobles gathering. Whispers followed him, some mocking, some curious. Finally, they reached the trial grounds. It was a wide circular space surrounded by tall crystal pillars. The floor shimmered with pale light as though alive. At the far end sat the Queen on a smaller throne carved into the wall itself. Beside her stood Princess Rena, her face calm but her eyes filled with quiet concern. The Queen raised her hand and the voices of the nobles fell silent. "Human," she said, "you have spoken boldly of love and truth. But here we prove words with action. Today you will face the first of your trials. If you succeed, you may remain among us with honor. If you fail, you will be remembered only as a voice without weight." Mark bowed respectfully. "I understand, my Queen." The Queen gestured and the ground before him shifted. From the light rose a creature unlike any he had seen before. Its body was long, like a serpent, but covered in scales that glowed with sharp light. Its eyes were golden and its movements were swift. The nobles leaned forward eagerly, for this was no simple beast. It was the guardian serpent used to test strength and will. Mark's breath quickened. He had no weapon, only his wits and courage. The serpent hissed, circling him, its scales flashing brighter as it drew closer. The Queen's voice carried across the trial ground. "Defeat it or endure it. Show us what makes a human worthy." The serpent lunged and Mark dove aside, rolling across the glowing floor. The crowd gasped as the beast struck where he had stood, its fangs sinking into crystal with a crack. Mark scrambled to his feet, heart pounding. He knew he could not match its strength. He had to think. He remembered his training back on Earth when he had studied creatures and their habits. A beast always had a rhythm. A beast always had a weakness. He focused on the serpent's movements, watching its coils, the way it paused before striking. Slowly, he began to predict it. When it lunged again, he dodged, not away but toward it, sliding under its body. The crowd gasped as he grabbed a shard of crystal broken from the floor. It was sharp, though not enough to kill the serpent. But Mark had no intention of killing. He only needed to prove his spirit. The serpent turned and struck again, but Mark planted the crystal shard into the ground between them. When the serpent lunged, its jaws struck the shard, not him. The shock stunned it for a moment. Mark used the paws to climb onto its back, gripping tightly as it thrashed. The crowd roared. Instead of striking the beast, Mark spoke loudly. "I will not destroy what belongs to your world. I will not kill what protects your people. I will endure it. I will master fear." The serpent bucked and twisted, but Mark held on. Every muscle in his body screamed, yet he refused to let go. At last the serpent stilled. It lowered its head, its golden eyes glowing softly, almost in respect. Then it slid back into the floor, vanishing into the crystal light from which it had come. Silence filled the trial ground. Then slowly voices rose in surprise. Some nobles clapped their hands against their chests in admiration. Others shook their heads, unwilling to accept what they had seen. The Queen's gaze was sharp but unreadable. "You did not slay it, yet you endured. You showed courage and restraint. You did not seek victory through destruction, but through spirit. This is rare." Mark bowed, his chest heaving from the effort. "I only showed what a human must be, my Queen. We do not always win through strength. Sometimes we survive by holding on." Princess Rena's eyes shone as she looked at him. She said nothing, but in her gaze was clear respect, deeper than before. She had watched him risk himself not for glory but for truth. The Queen stood. "One trial is complete. Others await. Let us see if your spirit holds beyond this first test." The nobles murmured, their curiosity burning brighter than ever. The human had not failed, and now the court wanted to see more. As Mark was led back to his quarters, his arms aching and his body sore, he felt a quiet strength rise within him. He had faced the first test and endured. He did not know what the next trial would bring, but he knew this much. Each step he took was proving not just himself but the spirit of humanity. The following morning, Mark awoke before the first light of Zalari's twin suns. The city was quiet, the hum of crystal towers a soft, constant presence. Today he would face the second trial, and he knew it would test more than just his courage. It would challenge his mind, his patience, and his ability to understand what it meant to truly persevere. The guards arrived without a word, leading him through corridors that twisted like a maze. The walls glowed with a soft, living light that pulsed as though responding to the thoughts of those within. Mark's mind raced with possibilities. Each trial so far had been designed to push him, and he expected nothing less today. When they reached the trial chamber, he found it unlike anything he had seen. It was a vast arena, open to the sky with platforms that floated above a glowing expanse. Between each platform stretched gaps too wide to jump. From the center of the arena rose strange obstacles, moving walls, floating spires, and energy fields that shimmered with dangerous light. The nobles had gathered at the edges, their faces curious, waiting to see how a human would manage. The queen's voice carried across the arena. "Human, your courage has been tested. Now we test your mind and patience. To reach the end, you must navigate the obstacles without error. Fail, and you will learn the price of carelessness. Begin." Mark studied the arena carefully. Each platform moved slowly in rhythm with the others. The energy fields pulsed in a pattern. To cross safely, he had to observe, anticipate, and act with precision. There was no room for haste. He knew that rushing would lead to failure. He began, stepping onto the first platform. It floated steadily, giving him a sense of stability. Mark focused on the movement of the next platform, watching the energy field pulse. With careful timing, he stepped forward, his feet landing lightly as the next platform shifted slightly. The nobles watched in surprise. Humans were small and fragile compared to their tall, powerful species. Yet here he moved with careful determination. As he progressed, the obstacles grew more complex. Floating walls twisted in unexpected directions. Energy beams flashed at irregular intervals. Mark paused multiple times, analyzing patterns and predicting movement. He realized that rushing would not help. Patience was the key. Each time he waited, studied, and moved deliberately, he succeeded where a hasty step would have failed. Princess Rena observed him closely. She noticed the way he never hesitated in thought, how he remained calm even when an obstacle shifted suddenly. She had never seen anyone handle danger with such quiet focus. She realized that strength came not from power or size but from clarity and patience. The nobles whispered among themselves. Some began to cheer silently for the human, recognizing his skill. Others shook their heads, unable to understand how he could navigate the trial with such precision. Mark did not notice their reactions. His mind was entirely focused on the trial, each movement deliberate, each step calculated. After what felt like hours, he reached the final platform. A large crystal pedestal rose before him, glowing softly. On it rested a small orb pulsating with gentle light. This was the goal, the symbol of completion. Mark approached it carefully, avoiding the energy fields around it. When his hand closed on the orb, a wave of light spread through the arena. The platform stabilized, the obstacles vanished, and the chamber was filled with soft music signaling success. The queen's voice rang out again. "Human, you have passed the second trial. You have shown patience, clarity, and intelligence. You think carefully, observe deeply, and act with purpose. These are qualities rare among your kind. You honor the spirit of humanity." Mark bowed, breathing heavily but feeling a quiet triumph. "Thank you, my queen. I only do what my people teach. We value thinking as much as courage, and we know patience can often be stronger than force." Rena stepped forward, her eyes bright with admiration. "You have shown more than strength today. You have shown wisdom. I have never seen anyone approach danger with such care and thought." "It is a rare gift," Mark smiled faintly. "I do not consider it a gift, Princess, only a lesson learned on Earth. We study patterns, we think before action, and we respect the consequences of each choice. That is how we survive, and perhaps that is how we can love carefully too." The queen's gaze softened slightly, a rare warmth in her eyes. She rose from her throne, acknowledging the success of the human. One trial remains. The final trial will test your courage, your heart, and the loyalty you carry. If you endure it, you will earn the trust of our court and the respect of my daughter. Mark nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He had passed 2 trials already, but the final challenge would demand everything. Yet he also felt a quiet certainty within himself. Humanity's strength was not in muscle or weapons, but in the spirit, the courage to endure, and the honesty to act with integrity. As he was led back to his quarters, Rena walked beside him quietly. Her voice was soft. You have surprised everyone, human. Not with strength alone, but with thought, patience, and care. I wonder what you will do next. Mark glanced at her and smiled faintly. I will do what I must, princess. Not for glory, but for truth. That is all any of us can do. The city glowed under the twin suns as Mark returned to his room. He felt the exhaustion in his muscles, but his mind was sharp. The trials of the Zalari were demanding, but he was ready. One challenge remained, and he would meet it with the full measure of human courage and spirit. The day of the final trial arrived with the sky ablaze in Zalari sunlight. Mark stood before the Queen and Princess Rena in the central courtyard, his heart steady but his thoughts racing. This trial was said to test courage, heart, and loyalty. He had faced beasts and obstacles before, but this would challenge everything within him. The Queen's voice rang out clearly. Human, you have shown strength, patience, and wisdom. The final trial will reveal the depth of your spirit. You must face a challenge that requires not only courage but understanding, empathy, and steadfastness. Only then will you earn the trust of this court and my daughter. Before him appeared a large field illuminated by soft, pulsating crystals. Scattered across it were illusions, images that moved and whispered. Some were beautiful, showing visions of joy and comfort. Others were frightening, showing dangers and pain. Mark realized immediately that this trial was not of physical skill, but of the heart and mind. He stepped forward cautiously. The first illusions tempted him with visions of comfort and praise. He saw a world where he was celebrated and honored without effort, where people adored him instantly. Mark felt the pull, but he closed his eyes for a moment and remembered the words of his people. True courage was not in taking the easy path, but in facing reality with honesty and integrity. The next illusions were frightening. Shadows of danger leapt before him, threatening to overwhelm him. He saw images of the Queen's displeasure, of failure, of harm coming to those he cared for. Fear rose in his chest, but he focused on calm, steadying his breath. He reminded himself that these visions were only illusions. They were meant to test him, to see whether he could remain true to his values. As he moved through the field, the whispers grew louder. Leave now, they said. You are not worthy. Turn back. Mark shook his head and pressed on. He thought of Princess Rena not as a prize, but as a person he respected. He thought of the Queen, of the nobles watching, and of humanity itself, which had always survived through heart and courage, not strength alone. At the center of the field, the illusions combined into one final vision. Mark saw Princess Rena in danger, surrounded by a storm of crystal shards and fire-like light. The vision was vivid and frightening. He felt a surge of instinct to protect her, yet he knew the trial was as much about patience and wisdom as bravery. He paused, thinking carefully, and then acted. Mark moved steadily, not recklessly, weaving through the illusions. He reached Rena and extended his hand. Trust me, he said, even though she was only an image. He guided her gently, focusing not on fear but on steady, careful action. Slowly, the vision dissolved. The field cleared, and the sun's light reflected from the crystals like gentle waves across the courtyard. The Queen's voice spoke once more, calm and powerful. Human, you have shown the qualities we seek. Courage, empathy, patience, and loyalty. You did not act for glory, nor did you seek to dominate. You acted with heart and truth. You have passed the final trial. Mark lowered his head in respect. I only did what I believe a human must do. We honor life, respect others, and act with honesty. That is our way, my Queen. Rena stepped forward, her eyes shining with a mixture of admiration and relief. You have seen me for who I am, not only for what I appear to be. You have shown more than bravery. You have shown respect, understanding, and care. I have never known anyone like you. The Queen studied Mark with sharp eyes that softened slightly. Then it is done. You have proven not only your spirit, but the spirit of humanity. You may remain among us as an honored guest, and my daughter will know you not for your beauty or skill alone, but for your heart. Mark felt a quiet warmth in his chest. He had not come here seeking recognition, yet he had earned it through honesty, courage, and integrity. He bowed to the Queen and then to Princess Rena. You have taught me more than I expected, Rena said softly. Not about beauty or appearances, but about what it means to be human. That is the greatest gift I could receive, Mark smiled. And you have shown me that understanding and respect are the true measure of connection. That is a gift I will treasure as well. The court erupted in quiet applause. Nobles who had doubted him now watched with respect. Seeing that the human had faced trials that tested mind, heart, and courage, and had emerged with honor intact. That evening, as the twin suns of Zalari set and the city shimmered with soft light, Mark stood beside Rena and the Queen. He had faced impossible challenges, endured fear and temptation, and proven the strength of human spirit. In the end, he realized that love, respect, and courage were all connected. To face truth, to act with honesty, and to honor others was to show the true power of humanity. The Queen placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "You may choose your path, Rena, but know that this human has shown what is rare in our world, a heart guided by truth." Rena smiled at Mark, her eyes bright. "And I choose to know you, human. Not for trials, not for words, but for the heart you have shown." Mark bowed once more, feeling the weight of the moment. Humanity had been tested, and it had endured. The trials had been hard, but they had revealed the power of courage, honesty, and spirit. For the first time, he understood that the greatest strength was not in the stars he had traveled through, but in the heart that carried him there.